They're not children. Why does no one ever listen? Every new hire we get thinks they know better. We tell them up front, clear as day, they're not children. But they never listen. And Dan was the worst of them. Dan showed up like most of the others, a guy looking for a change, tired of the 9 to 5 grind. He's been hitting the gym and he's proud of his physique and thought security work would be easy. When he walked in, he was bright eyed, eager, this energy about him. We gave him the usual seal, had him sign the papers, and then brought him out to post 47. That's where it started. The pit. It's quiet when you arrive at first. It always is. Mostly just the sound of those shovels scraping the dirt. Dan, just like all the others, froze when he saw them. Small figures, maybe a dozen or so, pulling away under the floodlights. Are those kids? He asked, his voice shaking. There's kids in that hole with shovels. What the hell is wrong with you people? We told him, as calmly as we could, they're not children. They sure do look an awful lot like kids. And they're crying. What the hell is going on here? We explained it again, slower this time. Yes, they look like children. And yes, they sound like children. They were not kids. They're manipulative, cunning monsters. And they'll do anything to get you to drop your guard. All you got to do is watch them, keep them digging, and make sure you don't get too close. It's that simple. Dan wasn't convinced. I could see it in his face, but I thought maybe he would last. The night shift started, uneventful. Dan in the guard shack watching the grainy monitors, sipping bad coffee, trying to keep himself awake. The pit, it was quiet, well, except for the shovels, clicking, clanking. Then they start crying. At first, it was soft, almost imperceptible, like a whimper that carried in the wind. And Dan ignored it, just like we told him to. But as the sounds grew louder and more intense, till it was impossible to tune them out, and one of them cried out as loud as it could, Dan grabbed his radio, his voice tense, and he radioed us. Hey, one of them sounds hurt. But of course, no one was there to answer. And for a while, he didn't do anything. He sat there, holding his flashlight, tapping it on his cup, staring at the monitor, watching as the creatures cried. The creatures that looked like children to him. One clutching its legs, sobbing. If you heard the sound, it would even make your heart cry a little bit. Dan leaned into the screen. You could see him shaking. He might have even said under his voice, poor kid. Knowing this now, the creatures have to tap into something deeper in people. It was almost imperceptible, but one of them, they changed. They began to look a lot like his daughter. I doubt he even noticed it, but you could see the gears turning in his head. He mumbled something under his breath. I think he thought, what if they were lying? What if these are kids? What if this whole operation is some twisted experiment, ripping children away from their families? And that's when he broke. He grabbed his light, unlocked the door, and approached the pit. He left his radio on the table. That was about when I came back. I could see him, but he couldn't hear me. I radioed him. Don't! Leave him alone. Just stop. But nothing. I watched as he shakenly approached the kids. You could see by his hand gestures he was saying just the one. It limped over to him, its small form shivering under the harsh floodlights, the rain bouncing off its skin. Dan knelt down, flashlight on the thing's leg. You could see its pale skin even from the distance. Dan touched it. I knew at that moment he realized it was too cold. Too cold for a human. Too cold for the temperature it was outside. You could even see it from the camera. It smiled. And then stretched. It opened wide. Dan! Get out of there! They're not children. But it was too late. The others, they dropped their shovel and turned to him as well, twisting and shaping into the unspeakable. I could hear Dan's scream from atop the tower. I auto-locked the door, and I watched quietly. The creatures overtook him, and then slowly turned back to their shape of children and began digging. We scrubbed the video footage, cleaned up the mess. A new hire starts tomorrow. And when they ask, we're going to tell them of this. We'll tell them the same thing. They're not children.
Thank you for listening to this short story, They're Not Children. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment below, and tell me what kind of short stories you would like to hear next.